Welcome to Our Girl Relationships. We talk about the problems people face in their day to day lives. Let's start with the video.
I hate that it came to this, but we finally had to sit down and confront my mother in law. My relationship with her always used to be good until we let her move in with us. My father in law is a multicultural studies professor at the university here in town. He recently got the opportunity to teach for 2 semesters in Germany, which has always been a dream of his. The only thing is, my mother in law has some health conditions that require her to be near her healthcare providers. It would be too much of a hassle for her to find all new doctors in Germany, so they decided she will be staying in the States. Then, my husband suggested that my mother in law should move in with us until my father in law gets back. They were planning on selling their house and downsizing soon anyway, so now would be a perfect time to do it. That way, they could save money by not having to pay a mortgage for a year, and my mother in law could get lots of time with her grandkids while living with us. It did seem like a solid plan in the beginning, so I agreed. But now, I really wish I could go back in time and change my mind. It's only been 3 weeks since she moved into our guest room, and I'm already losing my mind. In this short time, I've seen a side of her I've never seen before. It probably doesn't help that I work from home, so I'm cooped up with her here all day long. Her criticism of how I work was actually one of the first things that began to drive me insane. She moved in with us over a weekend, and then life went back to normal for us on Monday. My husband left for work and my kids left for school, and I retreated to my office like I always do. Except that day, my mother in law followed me. She made herself at home, kicking back in the spare chair I had across from my desk. She began to point out everything she would do differently with my wall decor. She pointed out that my side table was filled with distracting clutter. She offered to rearrange my file cabinets for me because it seemed the system I had was too disorganized. All the while, I was just trying to catch up on emails from the weekend and trying to drop hints that I really just wanted to be left alone to work. She didn't pick up any of them, though. She continued to sit there and nitpick for almost an hour, completely killing my productivity. Finally, she realized that her favorite show was on, so she went to go watch TV in the living room, which was fantastic at the time, but unfortunately, her television habits are another point of tension for us. The woman loves watching TV and absolutely refuses to miss any of her shows. And listen, I have 2 young kids. I do my best to limit their screen time, but sometimes I really just need to turn on their favorite movie to keep them occupied and allow me to get things done. My mother in law doesn't understand this, though. She insists that she be able to watch her shows anytime she wants. The other night, I had turned on a Disney movie for my kids, and halfway through, she switched it over to the news without even asking. Of course, meltdowns from my kids ensued, but she just told them to suck it up because it was a grown up's turn to watch TV. When I tried to speak up to her, she told me I was coddling them and still refused to change it back. I could tell my husband was frustrated too, but he didn't say anything. He's always been one to try and keep the peace. So I kept my mouth shut as best I could. It's only for a year, I kept reminding myself, but how was I going to be able to put up with this for a whole year? I thought it might be possible until one day when it all came to a head. It was a weekday afternoon, and I only had an hour or so of work left to do. but I smelled the strong odor coming from the kitchen, so I went to check it out. My mother-in-law was in the kitchen cooking something in a pot on the stove. As soon as I opened my office door, I was hit with a strong scent that I knew could only be one thing: her homemade fish stew. It's a recipe that she says has been passed down for generations in her family, and she has been forcing her entire family to eat it for decades. My husband always shudders whenever the stew is mentioned, but no one has ever had the heart to tell her how awful it is. I asked her what she was doing, and she said she was making dinner for us. "Just trying to take one more thing off your hands," she said, which I appreciated. But honestly, I would rather cook 100 dinners than have to stomach her fish stew. But I couldn't deny that it was a nice gesture, so I decided to keep my mouth shut and do the best to get through it. I decided I could whip up some quesadillas or something for all of us after my mother-in-law went to bed later, since I knew my kids weren't going to touch that stuff. But come dinner time, my mother-in-law insisted. Of course, my kids turned up their noses at the disgusting-looking soup, and she took personal offense to that. She told my husband to make them each take a bite because they'd never know if they liked it if they didn't even try it. My husband made sad attempts to try and airplane the stew into the kids' mouths, but with no success. My youngest one even started crying, saying she didn't want the yucky soup. That's when my mother-in-law really got angry. She said we were ruining our children by spoiling them, and that if we didn't make them do things they don't want to do, they'd turn into spoiled brats. That's when I finally lost my cool. I slammed my hands on the table and said, "That's enough." I went on to tell her how frustrated I was with how critical she was of the way we lived our lives, and how little respect she seems to have for the way we did things. I told her I had been miserable since she had moved in, and that she would have to tone it down if we were going to make this work for a year. She raised her eyebrows. "Or what? You'll kick me out?" She looked to my husband, who again said nothing. I never realized how much he feared her until now. Realizing he wasn't going to stick up for her, she got up and stormed off to her room. I threw out the soup, then made us all chicken quesadillas instead. The next day, after everyone had left for work and school, and it was just my mother-in-law and I at home, she confronted me while I was making my coffee. She asked if we could sit and talk for a moment, and I said yes. Naively, I thought maybe she was going to apologize for the way she'd been acting. Instead, she did the exact opposite. "It's become obvious to me that you've brainwashed my son," she said angrily. "The son I raised would never let his wife speak to me like that, and would never allow his kids to get away with so much. So let me tell you how this is going to go. Either you get over yourself and we all live in peace together, or I will do everything in my power to wake my son up and convince him to leave you." I was absolutely stunned. I couldn't believe she was serious. Did she really think my husband would take her side in all of this? I was so shocked. I couldn't think of anything to say in the moment. So she just smiled and walked away, leaving me to think over my options. But I knew there was only one option. She has to go. But I wasn't going to be able to confront her on my own. I needed my husband's support. When he got home from work that night, I took him into our room and told him what she had said to me that morning. He was shocked as well and apologized for allowing it to go this far. He agreed we needed to stand up to her. We decided we would do it the following night since the kids were staying at a friend's house. That night, my father-in-law called my husband just to catch up. But my husband ended up telling him everything about how awful his mother had been and the horrible things she had said to me. When my husband got off the phone, he said my father in law completely agreed that she needed to be confronted and that he would like to be included in the conversation as well. We decided we would FaceTime him and have the conversation with her all together. So the following night, my husband got home from work and we dropped the kids off at their sleepover. I made dinner and we asked my mother in law if she would sit down to eat with us. She agreed. Then we called my father in law. She was surprised when his face popped up on the screen. She looked back and forth at my husband and me with expressions of confusion and then betrayal. She realized that this conversation was not going to go the way she wanted. Instead, this was an intervention. Somewhat awkwardly, we all said hello to my father in law. Then my husband stepped up and began to tell my mother in law why we were all there. He said that the way she had been behaving recently was unacceptable and that the ultimatum she had given me was way out of line. He said that moving forward, she needed to either agree to be a better guest or maybe she should look into finding a place to rent until my father in law got back. When he said this, she looked at my father in law in horror. "You're really going to let them speak to me like this?" she said. My father in law sighed, then said, "They're right, honey. And honestly, I felt the same way for years, but have never wanted to bring it up and upset you more. But I think it's definitely time you realize the hurtful way you treat people." That shut her right up. I think my father in law was the last person she expected to hear this from, so hopefully it was a big eye opener to her. So we summed up that she needed to be more respectful to us while she was living under our roof, or find another place to stay. She didn't say anything else for the rest of the conversation, just nodded and stared down at her plate, seeming embarrassed. After we hung up with father in law, she silently put her plate in the sink and then went straight to bed. So now I guess all I can do is hope things get better around here. I know it had to be done, but I can't help but feel like a jerk for handing her ultimatum by giving her another ultimatum. But at the end of the day, I know it's for the best and that I have to do what's right for my family. Now, let's just hope things get better around here. It's been a week since we sat down and spoke to my mother in law about her behavior, and honestly, things have only gotten worse. After our conversation, she told us the next day that she was going to start looking for a new place to live. I think she felt so backstabbed by us and by her husband that now she's resentful of all of us. When she's around us, she's been exceptionally moody and critical, but otherwise she mainly keeps to herself in her room. I feel terrible that things turned out this way, but I guess I can't control how she was going to react. I can also tell that things have changed between her and her husband. I used to hear her on the phone with him every night, but now I don't hear them talking at all. I think this may have put their relationship on the rocks as well. Am I in the wrong for bringing it up the way I did? I absolutely didn't want it to come to this, but I couldn't let her continue to terrorize my house like that. I just feel some guilt for potentially ruining their marriage as well. NTA, you absolutely are not in the wrong. You have to protect your family, even if that means protecting them from other family members. ESH, even if she was being critical, I feel like you could have been a little more empathetic toward your mother in law. Her whole life was uprooted when her husband went to Germany. I think ambushing her like that was a little too harsh. My 59-year-old brother and his wife unfortunately passed away from a car accident when their son, Tris, was 7 years old. Tris was very young, and all of our relatives refused to take him in, including my parents. I decided to adopt him and take care of him till he gets stable in his career. I have an only child, the same age as Tris. We paid for Tris's education till he passed out of university and got a stable job, but the problem arose when Tris got to know about my will. It only had my daughter's name, and he got mad telling us that we never treated him as their child and he was just an outsider, which is definitely not true. I have always treated him and my daughter equally. They both got an equal amount of gifts. I always used to take both of them on trips. But as for my will, only my daughter will get everything from it. I don't know. Also, English is not my first language, so sorry in advance. Tris has gone no contact with us. Info. Yes, Tris inherited his parents' money, but it was not much because they died young. As for the will, my purpose to adopt Tris was to provide him proper education and help him build his career and make him stable in his life, which would not have happened if I would have not taken him in. Favoritism was never done, by the way. Kids and my kids always get along pretty well from the start, but it was the money I was saving for my daughter from way before. Okay, so I get it. Child deserves parents' love, and I might not be able to provide him with that. That makes me an a-hole. But for the people saying I should have let him go to foster care instead, it's utterly ridiculous, especially when we all know the reality of foster cares, and especially in a country like mine, which comes among the top 20 poorest countries in the world. The only reason I adopted Tris when no one was taking him in was to avoid him going to foster care. For me, I did what I thought was my responsibility. I provide him with love and a stable home. Maybe not as much as my daughter, as you guys are assuming, and I feel my duty is done as he is very well settled in life with a family of his own. Also, there were a lot of questions asking what Tris calls me. I can't address all of them, but he calls me uncle from the start. It was not a father-son relationship. It was more of a friend-type relationship. I don't want Tris to be grateful of, what I did. I just want him to understand that the estate belongs to my daughter from the very start. YTA, when you adopt a child, you agree to raise that child as if they were your own. What you've just told your son is that you love him less than your bio daughter. Always have and always will. You've just told him that he is not family. Of course, he's gone no contact with you. Why would he not? I'd go no contact with you too. It's not about the money, it's about the fact that you've made it clear you do not love him as much as your daughter and do not consider him family. YTA, you say multiple times that you only took him in because no one else would, and your only goal was to get him through school and to have a set career. You never treated him like a son. You treated him like a project with a deadline. The will was just the latest in what is probably a long line of microaggressions that convinced poor Tris he was never wanted and will never be accepted as your son. Of course, he went no contact. Hey, I'm 17, female, and my sister is 23, female. I have a really bad eating disorder, and recently I told my family about it. A doctor and my family have decided that hospitalization is necessary as I'm really underweight. And so my sister and her boyfriend came to visit me before I go there in a few days. Things are a bit tense in my family right now, and I think my sister was really shocked that I have an eating disorder as she hasn't seen me in the last 4 years since she moved away, and I've lost a lot of weight since then. I also haven't talked to her in the last 3 years, so it's awkward. She told me I'm like a sickly coke addict. Sounds weird. It's her humor. And told me that she doesn't know how I wasn't already in the hospital, and then asked if I think I'm fat, and I said, yeah, I guess. And just to be clear here, I don't really care about my sister. We haven't spoken in so long that it's hard for me to care about her and hold anything against her. And I also don't think negatively about her body. It's true that she is quite overweight, but it's not like I think any different to her because of it. She said that if I think I'm fat, then I must think she's obese and on her deathbed. I told her that she definitely is. I really regret saying this, and I will admit it just slipped out. It was a shock to see my sister's weight gain, but like I said, I really don't care about it. I don't even know why I said it. I was just really frustrated because she wouldn't stop commenting on my weight. I know that isn't an excuse, but it's the reason, and I know it's likely that she would comment on my weight as I said, I'm really underweight, but it was getting to me. She didn't say anything after that, but later her boyfriend pulled me to the side and told me that my sister is actually working on accepting her weight, as she is very body positive and happy to be a plus size. And she can't lose weight right now because of a medical condition. He also told me that I was stigmatizing being a larger weight and that I made her really upset. I felt like a big AH after I said that, but I felt like a bigger AH after I found out I made her upset over it. AITA? I know I didn't mean it, but I really don't want this to be what my sister remembers me by before I go into the hospital. NTA, your sis was dishing it out, calling you a sickly coke addict, but couldn't take it when you clap back. Her boyfriend is a total AH. You are literally in the hospital for your weight, yet he managed to make that about your sister. NTA. Weight in regards to how someone looks is one of those things no one needs to comment on, even in a light-hearted spirit. Your sister, as someone who is on a body acceptance journey, should know that. And you, as someone who knows how deeply those comments impact, should also know this. Could you have kept your mouth shut? Sure, but I completely understand being fed up and lashing out, especially as a teenage kid in a hospital away from your family and untangling some very complicated feelings around your body. Don't be afraid, OP, to assert the boundaries you need on your ED recovery. I've struggled with some ED stuff in the past, and the best piece of advice I got from my therapist was to ask those in your life to practice body neutrality. Don't comment on, if someone has gained or lost weight. Try and focus on asking people how they're feeling. This might be a good piece of advice to pass